Thanks, Favor. And thanks, everyone. I can only see one person's face, Favor's face, but anyways, I think it's fine. My name is Isaac, and I'm going to be talking about managing product at scale. By the way, if at any point you can hear me, let me know. I will also be sharing my screen because I have a deck here that just helps me sort of communicate this better. So let me share my screen. If you cannot see my screen, let me know. But otherwise, I would assume most people can see my screen. So again, my name is Isaac Wankochar. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, even though my title has a Senior Product Manager at Microsoft. All the opinions I share here are mine. They're not representative of Microsoft's, just to be clear. I don't know if I can have people do a show of hands at some point, but I will try because I would also like to get a good sense for who's in the audience. I assume a lot of people here are either product managers or aspiring product managers, probably product managers at startups. But if you're also already working at the scale-up company, that's also good as well. Anyways, let me jump in by just sharing a little bit about myself. So I did start my education in Nigeria. I did mechanical engineering at the University of Nigeria. After I graduated, I worked as a management consultant at KPMG. I did that for about 3 years. And in the course of that 3 years thereabout, I also worked on a couple of startups as well. The tech ecosystem, how to leverage technology for solving a lot of problems, in the society. I did, work on a startup called Traffic Day, trying to essentially build ways for Nigeria, for Lagos in particular. And then I also worked on what I call Villa Medulla. It was mostly like a website for searching for houses. Of course, this failed, but they were all very valuable learnings in building tech products and also doing it in a context like Nigeria, right? And up till today, a lot of these experiences have served me really well. I did also do a grad program at Stanford. I did management science and engineering, a master's degree for 2 years. And right after I joined Facebook, operations at Facebook. And in that time, my role did straddle, product management in some cases, in other cases, project management as well. And currently, I work as a senior product manager at Microsoft. So before jumping into like what product management looks like at scale, a lot of people who are not familiar with product management, I like to just set the baseline to make sure we're speaking the same language. And question is, what do product managers do? Generally, product management as a discipline is fairly, of course, compared to other disciplines like engineering or law, it's fairly recent, right? So it's still evolving, both in terms of how it's characterized and also in terms of what constitutes product management. So, and different companies have the different flavors of product management. I'd like us to start with just a very, in my view, crisp articulation of what that is. For me, I would say a very simple way to think about it is using Venn diagrams, right? And essentially, the product manager role sort of straddles 3 areas: customer, you're usually the voice of the customer; technology, essentially, you're working with engineers to build a product; and business, you're also building a sustainable business. Like your product needs to be able to evolve into a sustainable business. So with that in mind, I articulate the product manager's role as driving the vision, strategy, design, and execution of the product. The keyword here is vision, strategy, design, and execution. So you need to be visionary, being able to articulate what's this product going to look like today, next 6 months, next 1 year. Strategy as well. How are we going to be successful in the market? Design, like what is that experience going to look like for our users? What do we expect users to be able to do or achieve with this product? What are the core user jobs? And the last part is execution, right? How do we actually like build and ship these products? One word that's not underlined here that's also like super important is the word drive. In a lot of companies, product managers are not, the engineers don't report to you, designers don't report to you. You get stuff done by influencing people, not necessarily through authority, right? You don't just say, oh, you go do this. Because they don't report to you, you cannot exert authority, rather you exert influence. And that's why like these four parts, these four pillars are important because they help you get all these stakeholders, get your team on board. The vision helps get the team excited. The strategy helps have the team get confident in your ability to lead. Your design thinking helps the team stay grounded in the user problem. Your execution skills also helps everyone continue to move forward, continue to overcome obstacles, and so on and so forth. Okay, so with that sort of baseline in mind, I'm going to shift gears now to essentially trying to articulate what does product management look like at early stage startups versus at scale ups. So hopefully, we all have a good sense for what startups are, early stage startups are versus scale ups. I have a few things here to help, sort of, make these very clear. But generally, startups are companies that are still, either trying to figure out product market fit, usually super small in size, still they're not global companies yet. They're not necessarily household names, and so on and so forth. Whereas scale ups are like, established companies, established products, established revenue streams, all of that stuff, right? I know in these days of unicorns and super unicorns, a lot of what we call startups may actually not be startups, right? Some private companies actually that people describe as startups are not really startups because they're established, but the only different, they're established like every other scaled up company. The only difference is they haven't IPO'd yet. So those would not necessarily be startups, but of course we can generally expect that a lot of private companies would be startups. And of course, the phrase and the product management practice that I'll be discussing and talking about will be within the scope of technology companies. But of course, you can apply these same thoughts and concepts to other industries as well. So I like this quote because I feel like it helps sort of articulate for me and maybe for all of us, how to think about startup versus scale-up companies. Actually, I forgot who said the statement, but the quote is, don't let anyone tell you that one is strictly better or worse than the other. Both have their charms and their cracks. So sometimes people romanticize the idea of, being a product manager as a startup is better, or being a product manager at a big company is better. None is necessarily better than the other. They all have their different sets of skill sets you get to learn and you get to build and you get to flex. And they all have the different roles they play. Of course, every startup wants to be a scaled up company, right? And every scaled up company wants to also operate like a startup, wants to be nimble and agile and fast as a startup. So that goes to tell you that, hey, there are pros and cons for each of those. And of course, the skill set you need to flex as a product manager in one or the other vary. And I'm going to also talk through like what are those skill sets and how do people at I would say scaled up companies typically think about product, and how product managers successful at scaled up companies. So a little bit about like startups, some of the pros and cons. Startups, the pros. Startups are usually high energy and passion. Like a lot of what's driving the product execution and customer promise is there's a lot of passion, right? It's there is that excitement generally. There's that energy. And the other thing is, as a PM in a startup, you would need to be very hands-on from concept to delivery, right? You would have to wear multiple hats, like from talking to the customer to, sometimes even writing code, depending on nature of the startup, right? You need to go in and fix some code, fix some bugs very quickly, build your own data pipelines, pull your own data, all of that stuff would be something that you would expect, in a startup. The other is new ways of working, new tools, new frameworks, generally because a lot of startups have yet to establish what we'll call a fixed process of doing things. There is iteration. There's room for iteration. There's room for trying things, new tools. Today it might be, just clipboards. Tomorrow it might be, Jira. Next tomorrow it might be like some fancy tool. From going from Google Docs to Notion, all of that are things that you would see, startups try quite a bit because they're still in that phase where they're evolving the culture and make sure working together. And one of the other pros I have here is very fast product iterations. Product gets shipped very quickly, right? Very, very quickly, and mostly because there are not too many dependencies, right? Generally, your teams are well contained. Everything you build is within your team of engineers. You would see that in a scaled up companies, usually not so. If you're building very complex, products like an operating system, right? You would depend on a lot of teams. There are probably thousands of engineers working on that, on those products, hundreds of thousands. And there are lots of dependencies. Team A depends on the hardware team, the software team depends on some things, the hardware team needs to build all of that stuff. And so the iterations are not as fast as, say you're building just a very small self-contained product. What are some of the cons here? Change, some of the cons is that change happens constantly. So if you're not the type that, like to see a lot of things change, startup may not be for you because things are always changing. You're always hiring new people. They're always, reorganizing the team, all of that stuff. Resources are tight. So, even though there's energy, there might not be resources to execute on all the ideas you want. There might actually not be room to even do that much experimentation, right? Whatever you're building is going to the customer straight up, right? There is no, oh, we're going to, explore. There might not be that much opportunity to explore just because, the resources are tight. Things need to stay focused. And that leads me to the third con here, focused on the near-term goal. Yes, very clear, especially startups that are still like getting VC funding. There are very clear milestones you need to hit in the quarter, in the 6 months time frame, and so like all those goals, there's a laser focus on it. You as much as you want to be, think very long term, it's actually really hard because there's something that needs to ship in the next 6 months. Investments that span 5-year time horizons are hard to sort of justify because we're still in survival mode. We don't, who knows if the startup is going to be there in 5 years, right? And then some other cons here, multiple roles at one time can be stressful. Yeah, if you're wearing too many hats, it's possible that you might get stressed, right? And also one other thing here is no customer data to make decisions because either you haven't shipped yet or you're just shipping to a small set of customers. You don't have the scale of customer base to, or what we call critical mass, to feel like the data you have would lead to statistically significant inferences or deductions. And so a lot of times you have to work based on intuition and so on and so forth. And in this environment, some of the skills that are important here, making quick decisions. There is, because you're working against a tight timeline and things are changing, you got to make decisions quickly. You got to be able to manage uncertainties and change, because it's just the fact of your work. A lot of people in this environment are actually very entrepreneurial, because I mean, you're working at a startup, right? It's a it's a young venture, and you need to think like an entrepreneur. And of course, you also have to, as they say, fake it till you make it, in the sense that when you wear that many hats, you're not necessarily an expert in all of that, but at the same time, you can you're expected to operate almost like an expert. So there's a lot of guessing, as well as a lot of trying things and just working with good faith, in that environment. So that is sort of my articulation of summary of what the startup environment looks like. So let's look at a scale-up environment. Some of the pros of a scale-up environment is you're building products in new markets and channels. So, and that this is very true, because a lot of scaled-up companies are probably already building international products. So you're not just building products for English. Now you are the same product manager, but you have to build it for, say, the Spanish market or the French market. And these are some of the things I've done as well. And those require, a different set of skills. You also have quite a bit more resources than at a startup to invest in product development. So you can say, oh, some of these products, we're not going to see it in the next 2 years, because we need to invest the first 1 year, on research, or like the research could be, primary research, could be applied research. Just trying to understand the space, trying to see if we can actually we can invent some technical solutions to this kind of problem. Some of the other pros are that, there's starting to become hierarchy. And so at some level, especially if you're a junior person, you may not have to deal with, your work can be fairly contained, such that, a lot of the bargaining across teams can be properly managed. And one of the pros that you can be tactical and strategic at the same time. It gives you that because you're not just shooting for a 3 months, oh, what are we shipping this quarter? You can spend a little bit of time and think broader, and you can actually put together a 5-year plan saying, oh, this is what we're going to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and that's totally fine. Some of the cons, of course, involves, now you're going to be working with different teams, different departments. Some of them may not even be in your own country. They may be in other countries, other locations, other time zones. And managing all of these collaboration can be quite challenging, especially if your goals are not aligned. It requires a different set of skill set to manage those. Sometimes, delivery of product can be fairly slow. Slowness can come from just legacy stack. As you know, technology is evolving rapidly, right? It's changing very fast. But the last version of the product may have been built on a different stack. And now there's this new thing, that's this new hot thing, or this new hot framework. But a lot of your customers are still on the old one. So what do? So you're building within the new environment, but the legacy tech stack can actually hold you down a little bit, because now you have to worry about, backward compatibility, or how do we get your users to sort of upgrade to the new model? How do you transfer them over gradually? All of that stuff. The other con is, sometimes, of course, because of the size of the company, from a career perspective, you have to think through, okay, how do I ensure that I continue to grow? Sometimes it might seem slower than, say, in a startup. And I think the last one is sometimes navigating through culture changes can be quite, tricky, especially if you're in a company where between different groups, cultures can be fairly different, right? And sometimes you see these like with companies that have multiple locations. Depending on the location you're in, the culture may be slightly different. And some of the skill sets needed here, I'll just talk through some of them, is you need to know how to, at a skilled up company, you need to know how to continue to build out an old product while investing in a new product. Because the reality is at every big company, there is probably one startup trying to compete, challenge one corner of your product, right? So while you're continuing to work on these big, huge, successful products, like iterating, you also have to be on the lookout for, okay, what are the new things we need to invest in? Because if you're not continuing to invest in new things, over time, you would just become, this dinosaur, like you just age out, you're just not relevant anymore. Of course, another skill is, as I mentioned earlier, being able to take a product that's working, say in market A, to market B, right? Now, you're not just thinking about the Nigerian market, you're thinking about West Africa, or you're thinking about the whole of Africa. The challenge is very different, but that skill of being able to take products and ship them to new markets are things you need to build up on. Of course, managing stakeholders. You will have, because there are a lot more, it's a big established companies, you need to carry your leaders in mind on things you're building. You don't necessarily want to build things in isolation. You don't want to blindside leadership, right? So there'll be quite a lot more, presentations to leadership, getting their buy-in, and also stakeholders as well. You need to line up resources. You need to talk to stakeholders in other departments. And the last one, which is very important, and I'll talk about all of these in fair details in the course of this presentation, is building new processes and tools to scale, right? So in a scale-up company, when you think about as a product manager, you're the leader of the team. You need to think about, how do I ensure that processes I'm building out, they can scale? How do I make sure that we have the right tools that can enable us scale? And I'll talk through like some of the ways I have done this, and you can also apply these as well. Okay, so one area of interest that I've seen is, a lot of people ask or are interested in understanding is, how do you handle customer feedback at scale? As a scaled up company, you're probably getting thousands of customer feedback in different forms, right? So your customer feedback can come, either as ideas. Maybe customers just go to either your social media platform or whatever channels you provide to drop ideas, or sometimes they respond to certain aspects, some of the feelers you drop either within the product or on social media, or even opinions. Sometimes they give you feedback through the ratings of the app. Of course, if you're building mobile products, your app is going to be on the App Store. And so, they're going to be providing you feedback through the ratings, through the comments they make as part of the ratings. Some other times you're issuing out surveys and people are responding, or you're also just looking at the results, right, of experiments. And I'll speak to this in I guess the next slide. The experiments you're running, you're looking at the results, and that's some kind of feedback to tell you, okay, is this product or is this feature helping the user? Is the user's lives better for this feature or not? But the important thing is, at that level, at the level of a scaled up company, you would usually have multiple different channels of getting feedback from your customer. There are two skills important here. There are skills, being able to separate feedback that are actionable from feedback around customer support, because sometimes these two get mixed up. Sometimes, especially if your product involves some kind of customer support thing, sometimes users can give feedback or complain about, oh, I ordered this product, you said you do 2-day delivery, this is 1 week and it's not yet here, right? Versus, oh, I cannot, this part of the product is not working for me, or I am on social device and it's not working. So being able to separate out those two, and also being able to take a user feedback and prioritize them. If you're getting sort of tens of thousands of feedback on a daily basis, you have to evolve tools. And within big companies, there are very good language understanding tools for understanding like what are the buckets of this feedback. So for example, teams, I've seen, where teams build out some ML models, look at the different uh, even comments on the App Store to say, oh, can we group all these comments into categories, right? For example, some people are complaining about app crashes. How many people are complaining about app crashes? How many people are complaining about the app is too slow? How many people are complaining about it's not working on my device? And then coming up with some kind of heuristics for prioritizing all of these. And generally, the way I think about prioritization is you want to optimize for impact, right? And when I say impact, I mean both impact to the user and also impact to the business. And there are some, general framework for thinking about these. But the big point here is, as a product manager in a scaled up company, you always have to prioritize. You probably get more feedback than you ask for, and you need to have very good ways of prioritizing those, very good way of getting those requests and those feedback into your product backlog, right? And then also you need very good ways of uh, getting those improvements exposed to users. And that's what I'll talk about in my next slide. What does that feedback loop look like? Of course, user has given a feedback. Oh, you've seen that a lot of your users are complaining about this feature that's missing, right? So for example, let's just use Zoom because we're on Zoom, right? A lot of users maybe complain that, oh, I would love to be able to see all the speakers on the screen at the same time. Right now, you only allow 4 people's, face to be on the screen at the same. Can you, to be good to have more, blah blah blah. And let's say you get 1,000,001 feedback, but in some ways you have prioritized this one as this one seemed like the most impactful, both for the user and also for the business, and it's your number one priority. Now, how do you go about rolling out this feature? Of course, when in big companies, most times these kind of features will be rolled out as part of what we call an experiment, right? An experiment means you're going to build, if you have a hypothesis. So the hypothesis is, oh, if we increase the number of people that show on the screen from, and I think WhatsApp did this recently, right? If we increase it from 4 to, let's say, 16 or 8 people, it's gonna improve our user satisfaction. People will be more satisfied with the app. People will be more engaged. People will turn on their videos more, blah, 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 right? Those are sort of the metrics for measuring the success of this experiment. So then what do? Usually you would build the feature, but you will ship it to a small category of users, essentially small, and that's why a lot of times when you see people, maybe big companies announce that, oh, we are shipping this product, but we'll be rolling it out over the next few weeks. Sometimes they start with experiment. They only expose the feature to a small number of people, say, depending on, of course, how many, like what the user base is. If it's a company that has billions of users, you can show that feature to only 1%, and that will still be statistically significant. Sometimes other times you show it to 10% of the users. So essentially what it is an A/B experiment where, say 10% of the users have the feature, the other 10% do not have the feature. And then you can now look at the what we call the experiment scorecard, the experiment results at the end of that period to say, oh, this 10% that had the feature, did they perform some of these things we were hoping they will perform? Like some of the metrics we had, were they positive? Some of the hypotheses we have, were they positive? Or were those metrics going bad? So for example, if your hypothesis is, oh, if we increase the number of people who show up from 4 to 16, the number of calls would increase, number of participants turning on their video would increase. But when you actually ship the feature, you realize that actually the number of calls are reducing, number of people participating in video calls are reducing. That tells you that, there is a problem, right? Is either we're not building the right feature to meet the need of the customer, or we don't thoroughly understand the customer's need. Because it's like, and that these are some of the things that a lot of product managers at startups find very frustrating, where, oh, the customer said, oh, they want this feature, and then you built it and then nobody uses it. Right? A lot of times startups may not have the right tools to run some of these experiments, to be able to understand, okay, do we have the right feature actually? Do we have the right solution to the customer's problem? Do we even understand this customer problem well enough? But within scale-up companies, a lot of times you have those experimentation tools. They've already been built out. They're super easy to execute. And so you can actually, you can even execute this very fast. Quickly build out an experiment or a feature, roll it out to a small percentage of the users, measure the impact, learn what's working. And if you see that, oh, this is working as expected, then you can roll it out to the bigger audience. And if you find that it's not working, you won't roll it out to the bigger audience. You either go and reiterate, iterate on it, like work on it a little bit more. Maybe you can refine your hypothesis. Maybe you can go understand the users a little bit more, all of that stuff to ensure you deliver the right product to the users. The next thing I'll talk about is collaborating on a large scale. This is also one area that a lot of people struggle with. And I myself, I did struggle with this. Like, as you move from a smaller company to an even bigger company, you find that you have to collaborate more. And I think I mentioned some of these. The reason why you have to collaborate more is now there are a lot more dependencies. So for example, if I'm building a product on, say, on a mobile platform. So let's say I'm a product manager for, what's an example? Let's say I'm a product manager for trying to find Twitter, right? And I'm building a messaging product, right? So of course, the app itself, the Android app or the iOS app, the overall app itself is being maintained by some other team, right? I am building a specific part of that product or part of that feature. So in that sense, I will take a lot of dependencies on the product team that owns the app itself, that builds out the app itself. If I'm building a messaging product, I will need to, leverage some work with the notifications team. There might be a separate team for notifications. There might be a separate team for all sorts, depending on like what the messaging would be. Is it just a text messaging? Would it be a call? Can people place calls? All of that. So you would need to collaborate with a lot more teams. And getting collaboration to be successful can be very tricky, right? And I try to lay out these, what I call, sort of 7 building blocks of collaboration. I like to think about collaboration as very analogous to project management. What that means is when you set out to build whatever you're building or to manage a specific aspect of the product, you need to be clear on what the goals are, right? You need to line up the resources. You need to have the tasks all well assigned to various specific members of the team or various teams, and have what we call clear DRI, directly responsible individual, right? Essentially, DRI is who is the responsible person for this area of work. You also need to understand what are the risks, what could go wrong. You need to build out a good communication channel. How do we keep each other, because now these are different teams you're working with who might be in different locations. How do we communicate? Is it going to be over Teams or Slack, or should it be through email? Like, that communication channel needs to be clear. How often do we communicate? Do we plan to share status report every week? Do we do it every day? Do we do it every month? Do we do it, bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, right? All of that needs to be clear. Then the scheduling as well. You need to take that overall feature and say, we have to break it down into small parts. When will this be ready? When will this be ready? When will this be ready? And line them up. And the last part is quality control. As with every feature, the more dependencies there are, the more opportunities for failures, the more weak links get introduced, right? The more points of fracture get introduced. So you need to make sure that you're also keeping good control of the quality of the feature being shipped. And the way to think about this is, so let's say I'm planning to ship some great feature for I know WhatsApp just launched a feature recently such that you can if someone calls you in a group call and you couldn't pick, you can see the missed call and then click on some button and you can rejoin that call, right? You can join the call back even if you missed it the first time. So you don't have to, in the past, you have to message, whoever called you, say, oh, can you add me again to the call? And then the person has to go struggle with where to add you, all of that stuff. But now, once you see the missed call, you can just click on something and you can join the call. You don't need to message anyone, right? So in building that kind of feature, the product manager who built that feature may actually be different from the product manager who is responsible for the voice call itself feature, right? So, and there might be lots of dependencies. And when I say dependencies, both from a technology perspective, and also just from a feature perspective, right? So you need to make sure that the technology is even ready itself. So for example, if that feature requires, let's say, a little bit more memory management on the device or on the cloud, and some other team is responsible for like designing that new memory system, then in how you plan your feature, you need to say, oh, whoever is building the memory stuff would not be able to finish it until the next 3 months. So that means I cannot even launch this new calling capability in the next 3 months. I have to wait until that memory capability is available. Then it will now take me another 2 months to build on top of that. So essentially what this is, and I've done this a lot, where you have to budget for time for your dependencies to be ready. Because if those dependencies are not ready, you cannot build on top of them, right? And you have to give them a lot of advance notice, like work with them very early, lots of months in advance to say, oh, we are planning to build XYZ feature. I know you own this part of it. We'll be depending on your feature. Can we agree? Can we take joint OKRs? OKRs are objective and key results. Can we have essentially the joint goals? Can we have joint goals together to say, you build this for us so that we can build this other thing? And you make sure that they're all lined up such that whatever they're building for you is available for you now to start building your stuff on top of them. So that is how to navigate all these dependencies. And sometimes their own timelines too can slip. So they can also be delays on their part. Successful product managers in these kinds of organizations know how to work with their partners to manage those delays. Like as those delays come up, how do we navigate them? What are some ways how do we help move things along? How do we help you unblock? Should we borrow you some of our engineers to help you, move along quickly? Or what can we do to help you move things along faster? Right? So all of that. And also, how do we keep each other, how do we know like where things are from your perspective? How do we make sure that we're tracking things very well so that we can know, oh, if things will slip, like if things would be delayed or not, right? So those are things that, being successful in a scaled up company are skills you have to build. And also skills you have to even get that other team to agree, right? Sometimes, teams, they don't have incentive to do things for you. I mean, think about it. Why should team A build something just so that you can build something on top of it, right? A lot of the product management skill you have to learn in collaborating with people, and you have to be able to use and display is getting partners to buy into and support what you're building. And the best way I've seen to get that to happen is to create win-win scenarios, right? Make sure that there is benefit for that team. It's clear to that team what they stand to benefit. Make sure that whatever you're building your goals are aligned. That means it's almost, think about it, it's like what you do for even when you're trying to get married or trying to date someone, right? Your goals need to be aligned. What the person is trying to achieve needs to align with what you are trying to achieve. Otherwise, they don't have any incentive to build things for you, right? So super, super important. Probably a significant amount of your time as a product manager in a scaled up company um, will be to work with partners, and there will be a lot more of them. And you need to be able to work with them very effectively, because if one of them doesn't deliver, then your product will not be successful, right? And spending that time making sure everyone is on board with what you're working on, everyone is as excited as you are, it's all win-win-win for everyone. Super important. And also, once your product launch, also learning how to appreciate those team members, those stakeholders, like calling out their contributions is very important, because it helps them build confidence in you, and also help them continue to trust you for other future collaborations as well. Okay, and now this part is, I'll talk about like how do you sort of ensure that your team, your direct team, is also set up to be able to be successful at scale. I like to think about these, using what I call the golden triangle. You need to think about like the processes, the people, as well as the technology. Um, in a lot of startups, you can actually get by without documentation. Um, a lot of times I've worked with startups, so I've been involved in startups. You A lot of the history are in people's heads, right? Like when you join, for you to learn, they'll tell you, oh, go and talk to so and so, and then you go to this person, and then the person just keeps talking for hours. Like everything is in their head. They're not actually documented. You would realize that as companies become bigger, that doesn't scale. That doesn't scale very well, because then, like, imagine if it's a 10,000 person company, even that might be even small, 100,000 person company. Like, how many people are going to go and talk to the CEO? I mean, most of them would not, right? So documentation starts to be very important. As you would realize that in such an environment, you need to produce a lot more documentation. Even sometimes your engineers actually need documentation. Like right now, when I work with my engineers, I need to document, I need to actually write out what we call product specs, product specification. Usually it's not too long, a couple of pages, articulating what we're building. This is the customer problem, right? This is the opportunity. This is why this opportunity is very important. This is why we need to work on this opportunity right now, right? And these are the set of features, or the set of things I'm hoping to build. I want to build to meet that customer need, and this is how we're going to measure success, right? Having that clear for even the engineers to be able to read, digest, very important. And not just for the engineers, but also for your partner teams as well. Like usually I'll create that document, I'll sit with my immediate development team, including the engineers, the designers, the data scientists, to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, right? What are your thoughts? Does this make sense? How excited are we about this opportunity? Do we agree with this premise? Do we believe we've understood this customer problem well enough? Do we believe this solution makes sense? And in that first iteration of conversations, there will be lots of ideas, lots of modifications, lots of, I'm seeing this inside, but I think we need to dig into this a little bit. The designer might be like, oh, well, this experience, users usually from, prior research, we know that users don't like, users actually don't, scroll. They prefer to swipe left and right. Tinder probably seems like the leading UX paradigm. They give you all these ideas, and you of course take that and make the spec even better, right? And once you've done that with your immediate team, now, as part of that conversation, maybe the engineers will be like, oh, well, to be able to do this, we would actually need the support of this other team that's working on this other product. I think we should talk to them. So you've identified all your dependencies. Those new teams are like your dependencies, right? And what you do is, I take this document, I set up a meeting with those teams. I also share it with them to say, hey, this is what we're thinking, right? A lot of that documentation would help first put all the ideas in one place so that if a new member joins the team or a new partner joins the project, they can understand where we're coming from. Also, prioritization. Prioritization becomes important because you would have a million and one things you need to work on, and you need to have a clear process of prioritization. So let's say you're working on adding a like button, and then somebody comes in and say, oh, we need to also add, or customers are saying, oh, not just like, but it needs to be reactions, and now you need to prioritize. You can't do all of them at the same time, so you need to prioritize. So you need to evolve a good prioritization framework. Say, oh, well, whenever this new customer feedback comes, we put them on a backlog and we'll walk through the backlog. Like we'll be prioritizing through the backlog. Maybe we would meet as a team every week to review all the feedback that have come in and say, oh, which ones are the most high impact, and prioritize based on that, right? Other times, and there are different ways you can evolve these processes. Some other people would have different ways of prioritizing their work. And as part of that prioritization, it would also involve sort of, presenting to multiple teams and even leadership to help say, okay, which ones can we fund, which ones can we not fund, right? And the last one is road mapping, which is what I just referred to. Like, how do you solidify, firm up what it is you're working on for this quarter, for this half? Like, what is that process? You'll find that in a lot of large companies, they have they have planning cycles. Maybe at the beginning of the year, there will be a planning cycle where every product manager puts together all the things they want to work on over the next 6 months. They will present it to their peers. They'll present it to leadership. Like, those processes are built to streamline and add a little bit more discipline, because that's what's required as companies become like really big. The second bucket here is fostering leadership. As companies become big, it is not effective for only one person to be making all the decisions. So you want to foster leadership, and what that means is you want to empower others to be able to make the right decisions. And the way I've seen this be successful is that, so every decision doesn't have to be taken by the product manager, right? The engineers, and this is how successful product teams should actually operate. In the sense that if things are done well, if your engineers, your designers, your data scientists, your partners, if they are all actually bought into the vision, if they are all clear on the objectives of the product, then there's some decisions they can take at their level, right? They don't need to ask for, PM product manager inputs, because it's clear what the vision is. It's clear to them, what the goal is, right? So, and as part of this is very, very important, because in a huge company, sometimes you find that the PM is working on 3 or 4 features. You cannot be involved in everything 100%, right? So you need to make sure that every member of the team is empowered to make the right decisions. And also, you need to evolve your leadership style as well. You're not the commander. Oh, okay, you go do A, you go do B, right? You're mostly recommending and mostly setting up the team structure, so that people have that, independence and freedom to be able to make the right calls and do the right things. And the last part is leveraging technology. Of course, this goes without saying, right? Technology can help expedite and amplify a lot of our efforts. It can do that in a good way. It can do that in a bad way. People say generally, if you have a bad thing and you scale it, it will be bad. In fact, it will be worse, right? Scale doesn't necessarily all of a sudden confer goodness on something that's bad. So if you don't have the right fundamentals and you're scaling, you're going to be scaling the wrong thing. If you have a toxic work culture, let's say it's a culture where people are just toxic, very abusive, disrespectful, that is going to scale. You're going to scale that, whether you do it on Slack or Teams or face to face. It doesn't matter. If you introduce technology, people are still going to be rude. People are going to be jerks. People are going to be trolls, because that is what it used to be when you were 10% in a room, right? So technology, of course, can help scale the right behaviors. And some of these technology tools can be used for collaboration, right? Especially when you're working across multiple time zones, um, excuse me. So, one team is in Nigeria, the other is in South Africa. The time zones are different, or even Kenya. There's now 2-3 hours time difference. Or even, if you want to make it even more interesting, one team is in Nigeria, the other is in the US. There's an 8-hour time difference, right? While one is going to bed, the other is waking up. So how do we make sure that we can collaborate effectively? What tools can we use? The other is, what are some tools we can use to automate workflows, right? Workflows from checking in codes to CI/CD, how continuous improvement, continuous deployment of code, all of that stuff. And these are where you find that a lot of the scaled up companies typically either they are buying very specific tools for this, or they're even building them in-house, right? Because sometimes those technologies do not exist and they have to create them in-house. Okay, let's see how we're doing on time. I know I've been talking for quite a bit. I have one more section to cover and then I can stop and take some questions. So of course, I presume that a lot of people here are wondering, oh, I'm a PM at a startup right now. I'm thinking of, I'd like to, take my career to a scale-up company. How should I think about the transition? I think the critical thing, and I mentioned some of them at the start, is to understand like what skill set are needed in a scaled-up company, right? Like, how do you evolve your and increase your PM toolkit? As I like to say, the PM profession is such that you need to be adding to your toolkit, right? The different skill set that will help you be successful in one environment versus the other. So some of these I've already articulated earlier, but I'll reiterate them here. Generally, for a scale-up company, you're mostly working on, a lot of times they're working on products that already have, market fits, right? Or at least the company itself has established itself as having made it to some extent, right? A lot of times you're focusing on growing what's already successful. So Gmail is already successful. How do we grow it from 1 billion users to 2 billion? Like, that's the problem you're trying to solve, right? Facebook is already doing very well. How do we go from 2 billion to 3 billion users? A lot of scale-up companies actually can also be more risk averse. And when I say risk averse, in the sense that they already have products that are bringing in a lot of money. So let's say we already have this product that's bringing in, billions of dollars every year, right? Usually we are not in the haste to change it that quickly. There's something that's making it already work today. And so, changes are generally going to be slower. Of course, there's the burden of higher expectations in a scale-up company, because now you're at 1 billion users. People can expect you to be able to double that to 2 billion, and why not? You have the resources, so maybe you should do it. And I also mentioned that it takes a bit more time to try things and to do things for long term. You have the luxury of being able to think long term. Companies, Google invests in what they call the big bets, right? The self-driving car. They've been working on that for what? Almost 10 years now, right? And, with hundreds of engineers, like huge investments there. But, that's what scale-up companies do. They can put a lot of money into things that can be for try, like let's try and see if we can be successful here, as well as things that are longer-term bets. So in this kind of environment, what are things that you need to be successful? You need to be a team player for sure. Like, this is not usually in a scale-up organization, you can't want to be the superstar, the one-man army. You just won't get things done. You need to be able to depend on people to get things. Because your product area is like, there is no one product manager at except maybe the overall head of Gmail, but a lot of the product managers are working on some part of Gmail, not the entire, they don't own the entire Gmail. So, and what that means is that you need to, the, what's it called? The certain features of Gmail, the search feature of Gmail will take dependency on the Gmail, the team that's building the app itself, right? And that team, and will also take, dependency on another team that's building the back end intelligence to be able to process those search results, the indexing engine, the search engine itself that's behind, the Gmail search capabilities. So you inherently need to be a team player, and not just a team player. You need to be able to work with people to be successful, because there will be a lot more people to work with, and there will be a lot more people you need to influence. The next dimension is you need to be able to raise the bar in a specific dimension. And when I say this is, you need to, even though I said, hey, you need to be, a team player, but you also need to be able to bring something special to the team. For some people, it's mostly, hey, can I bring new ideas? Others is, can I help teams work faster? Others are, can I help these two departments, they never agree. Can I bridge them very well? Can I bridge them to agree so that we can even build something greater? The third thing to call out here is, usually this scale up, they want people that are high potential in the long run, right? They can see them continue to deliver at a very high level for a long time, because generally, with scaled up companies, employees tend to stay longer, right? I'm sure if you go to Google, there are people who have been at Google for 10 years. People tend to stay longer than at startups. And the third and the last one is are good connectors, good at aligning and connecting group. Like, I cannot on the overstate this because it is like a lot of features fail because teams are not aligned, right? Because teams are not connecting together. And of course, as a big company, you don't want, it's a failed state if a user is using the product. So for example, if a user is using Facebook and then realize that, oh, it looks like the team that built A is different from the team that built B. Like, it's so clear, so obvious, because things are disjointed. That is a failed experience for the user, right? You want to build a coherent product that users feel like, oh, this feels, this feels seamless across board. And getting to be able to do that involves strong connection skills, strong collaboration skills. In fact, a lot of times teams will be testing for that. Can this person work very well with other people? Or is this person just a lone genius? Usually lone genius would struggle in a lot of scaled up environments. Okay, so I will stop here this time. I think I cannot see my clock, but I don't know how well I'm doing on time, but maybe we have a few minutes for questions.
You're doing great. And yes, thank you so much for that. I learned quite a lot, and I know everyone on the call will agree with me on that as well. So yeah, let's just thank Isaac via the reactions and thank him in the chat for that awesome session. And it's very, very immense and wonderful. Thank you so much, Isaac.
Absolutely. Um, are
So
there
we
some
have,
questions on the chat that we can quickly go over?
yes, quite, we have quite a number of questions already. So we have, Lillian has asked about 3 questions now, and I will go ahead to read them so you can share some thoughts and answers to the questions. So do you want me to read everything at once, or I read it, you answer? How will you prefer?
Uh, okay, if you read everything at once, I might forget most of them. So maybe one at a time. I think that will work better.
Okay, all right. So Lillian is asking, is it possible to be a product manager and a product designer, like concurrently at the same time?
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about this within the context of like the roles, generally, as a product manager, you also need to understand design, right? You need to have some design intuition. In fact, a lot of product interviews, product manager interview process for some of these big companies, they will take you through sort of there will be product design questions or product sense questions. Those are not necessarily testing or if you're able to move pixels around, but can you understand the fundamentals of how to build great user experiences, right? So the short answer is if you are a product designer looking to transition into a product manager, definitely go for it. I've seen lots of very successful product managers that were product designers. If you are a product designer and also or a product manager and wondering, oh, is it helpful for me to also have design skills? The short answer is yes. Of course, if you have a designer on your team, you're not expected to be the designer, but having that ability to think about what is a good design, um, and this is something I do quite a bit, generally and I expect every product manager to like, as I'm going around, sometimes I encounter some things and I'm like, oh my God, this is bad design. I've had several times where, one of my favorite one is when I like check into hotels, I always go and check out the bathroom and say, okay, can I operate the shower? And if you're like me, you run into a lot of instances where the shower has just been over designed. You can't figure out how to get the water to come out, right? Because somebody has, done more than is necessary and the product just become unusable, right? And some of these very minute things, they're like, this is a bad design. Who designed this roundabout? Like you're in a roundabout and you're so confused. You're not sure, okay, how, where am I supposed to go? How? And then you end up almost causing an accident and you're like, somebody didn't think this thing through. So definitely very beneficial to, as a PM to also have that design chops.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Isaac. So the second question is like a continuum of the first one as well. Lillian is saying she's a product designer and she wants to transition into product management and was asking if you had like any advice you would like to share.
Yeah. So what I would say is, and I think this I've already covered some part of it. Generally, you don't wait until say you have the title before you start to exhibit the skills or start to learn the skills. Practice. I actually started by volunteering to be like a product manager for an area. I always tell people that find those opportunities to volunteer. Let's say you're the designer on your team doesn't have a product manager, you can volunteer and say, hey, can I just start playing the role? Can I help the team like put together like the product vision, the product strategy? Can I, make sure like work with the design engineers to move the product along? Or let's say even you have a product manager, but there's the product manager, she's just overworked, right? There's so much she's juggling. You can, talk to her. Hey, this small feature, are you okay with me? Like just helping you. I want to learn, product management, helping you a little bit on this. Show me what I need to do. All of that stuff. So my advice is definitely go for it. Try to find all opportunities, especially practical opportunities to learn. Don't wait until you have the job before you learn the skill. In fact, most times the jobs would want you to have the skill anyways. If you can't practice in your organization, build stuff on the side with your friends. Like you will learn as well, like what it means to be like you learn the vital skills of a product manager, even just building stuff by yourself on the side with your friends.
Thank you very much, Isaac, for that. There's one more question from Lillian, and so Lillian, let's know in the chats if those answers have been great. One more question from Lillian is so I think in the on the slide where you add the golden triangle and the part of systems, systems, you add documentation there. So Lillian is asking, what does documentation entail? Maybe you want to shed a little bit more light on it.
Yeah, so documentation just entails like writing things down. Like, don't let everything just be in your head. Like what I do is, and it starts with things as simple as like when I have meetings with my team, I actually take meeting notes. And meeting notes is not, I'm not saying everything people said, I'm just saying, what did we agree? We agree on this, we agree on this, we agree on this. I have like a project status tracker where we're tracking, oh, this is where this is where this is when we said this will be ready, this is a new problem that came up, all of that. That is the process of documentation. Documentation also involves like design decisions, right? Say the design has evolved. There's a version A and then version B, or iteration one, iteration two, iteration three, like having all of that documented such that first is useful for when a new person joins the team, they can actually just read this document and get a good sense for, oh, this is how we came to this point. This is where we started. This is how we came to this point. That's one. And two, they can also be references. You might also get transition off that project, right? That product area. And that happens quite a bit in big companies. Maybe you've been on this product area for like whatever, 3 years, 4 years, you want to try something new. Within the same company, you may go work on other products. As a new person is coming in, like this is very good documentation that will be good to hand over to that next person, that documents the history, right? So documentation is in different form. Um, you know, documenting the work you're doing, but also documenting and sharing it outwards as well to other stakeholders, other leaders in the company, so that they can have visibility into your work.
Thank you very much, Isaac, for that. Do let us know if that was okay, Lillian, in the chat. So another question, we have another question here from Jesse, and he's asking what skills, like what are the most basic skills someone who is venturing into product management should have, and he wanted us to know if a technical skill is a must to be very successful or to be successful as a product manager.
Yeah. So in fact, I did write an article recently, essentially asking the question like, how technical does a product manager need to be successful? My perspective is, as with most things in life, it depends. So if you're working on a very technical product, so for example, if I'm building some very, machine learning heavy product area, of course I need to understand what's going on, right? I need to be technical. Like I need to actually, I don't have to be an ML expert, but I need to understand the language of ML. And for me, that's the baseline across all of these things. I think you need to know enough to be able to have good conversations with your engineers, um, and be able to make the right decisions working with them, be able to lead the team effectively. So if you're working on very, very technical projects, then yes, I would say you need to know enough. You don't have to be, again, an expert. It doesn't have to be a degree. It may just require you reading, asking the engineers, hey, are there things I can read to just understand the basis of machine learning or the basis of AI? That is something you need to do. Also, it depends on the team structure as well. In some companies, you would have a product manager. You also have a technical program manager. So in a lot of those kind of teams where there's a technical program manager, the product manager does not necessarily need to, be technical. Like you just don't, right? And so because the technical program manager can help handle a lot of that, the product manager would mostly focus on like vision and strategy. You may not necessarily need to get into technicals. So that is also where like that team setup is. But my advice generally is you don't need to be technical. Don't let being technical be the barrier. What you need to do is understand how technical systems work, right? So understand how technical systems work. Be humble to learn, and also understand what you need to learn to be able to have effective conversations with your engineers and developers. But you don't need a CS degree to be a success. I don't have a CS degree, right? You don't need to know how to code. A lot of people find it, surprising, but yeah, you actually don't. I've seen very good product managers who do not know how to code, but they can still lead technical teams. They understand what conversations need to be had. They understand technical systems. They can make the right trade-offs, and yet they cannot write a line of code to save their lives.
Thank you so much for that, Isaac. Thank you so much for that, Isaac. I think one of the things really important things I picked out from that was, you need to understand the technical aspect. I think you don't necessarily need to be technical, but understanding it. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So, and also, if you don't mind sharing us a link to that your article, we would love to take a read of it on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share. I can maybe look for it while we're on this. By the way, let me stop sharing my screen. I think I've been sharing for quite a bit. And you can also follow me on Twitter. I share quite a bit on my Twitter as well, on tech, on the product management practice, but also generally on tech and just my thoughts on how I see things evolve. So, and like for people who want to connect with me, you can connect with me easily there. I respond to DMs, and happy to keep in touch.
Right. Thank you so much for that. So there's one more question from Vagon. So Vagon says, what would be is asking for an advice. So he's managing, when a PM managing a product that is a not non-lending product like airtime, bill payments, and all of that. The product looks fine already, and he's not sure what to do or where to start. The product is fine, he's just managing it, but he's not sure what to do or where to start. So what's the advice? I don't know if you get the question. Did you get the question, or you like it?
I actually did not understand what you said. And maybe if it's something that's also very specific, I think we can connect offline. Maybe send me a message on Twitter. Okay, if it's not something you feel you can share a little bit more detail here, but if you can share detail here, I'm also happy to answer here.
Vabron, would you like to speak?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Okay. So the question is, in a case where you find yourself, now it might not. The question was actually you being a PM for a non-lending product that looks good, like basically everything functions fine, right?
Okay.
And you're not sure what you're supposed to do. It's a different thing. Okay, I'm coming to let's say manage lending, and my job is to make it maybe easier for customers to lend. Or I'm managing, let's say, the company use Twitter, for example, and my business is to make sure people engage more. And so you're not sure because the product looks fine. So what are you supposed to do? And you're not told, okay, I'm here to do specific, just okay, manage this product. And you're just like, okay, yeah, manage product. So what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's a very good question. And the way to think about it is, you need to know at what stage different products have different life cycle. There's something called the life cycle of a product, right? So when you launch a product for the first time, it's still, so if you take a product as having let's just say 4 life cycles, right? The initial phase is you're just you're still is an infant stage, and then infant, maybe you're still trying things. Then there's the early adopter stage, then there is the mainstream, and then there's a mature product. There are some products they're just mature, they're just there, nothing is changing with them, and it's likely that nothing will change for a very long time, right? So you need to know where your product is at in that life cycle. That's one, first of all, because that helps you know like what mindset to apply to that product. That's one. Then 2 is also to always remember that no matter how mature your product is, there's disruption just around the corner. Somebody is right around the corner looking to eat your cake. And so you need to also be thinking about, even though this product is mature, you don't want your product to just be static. And the way I like to think about it, or explain it to people, is, see, nothing should be static because the world itself is moving. I'm sitting here and having this call. The earth itself that I'm sitting on is actually spinning. So if the earth and everything around me is actually moving, why am I the one that want to be static? So in that product space, you also need to think about how can we continue to evolve this product area so that it can still be relevant, right? If it's a product that's like a cash cow that's generating a lot of revenue, we can say so that it continues to generate a lot of revenue, because you notice that if you don't do anything, like if you just leave the product, right, it's going to go like this, it will come down, right? And we've seen it with, think about it. How many products were so good and then now they're no more? The Palm Pilot was so good, it's disappeared. There are lots of examples. Nokia was like hot things. I know Symbian was like, man, I remember when I first used the Symbian. A lot of people these days don't know what Symbian is. MySpace was like the hottest thing in social at some point, and now it's gone. See, you got to know that products are not everlasting. They by themselves, they don't endure, right? If you don't do anything, they're gonna disappear. So even though they said, oh, manage the product, you need to say, how do I, like, based on my understanding of our users, do I believe I've satisfied all the needs of these users? The question likely is no, right? Are there things I can improve to even make this even better? I work on emails, right? We've been using emails for over lots of years, but there is still a lot of opportunities to improve emails. And you will see a lot of improvement in emails, both, for Outlook as well as for Gmail, because there is always opportunity, right? Right now, I've worked on features within Outlook that are like very new, new paradigms, new opportunities. And that's because every product actually has opportunity to continue to improve, to continue to get better. So always push yourself, right? If you think there is nothing you can do to improve a product, then my guess is that you need to like push yourself a little bit harder, right? Except if you've decided that, oh, this product will just let it die. Because if you just leave a product, it will die. It would not by itself be, just self-sustaining into perpetuity. It would die a natural death, and it would die very slowly sometimes, right? So, but yeah. So think about your space as just think about it as I'm a CEO of this area of this work. That's a lot of times people say, oh, PMs are CEO of a product. That's not a great analogy, but for the purpose of this conversation, I want you to think about it. If that's the product you're managing, it's like the woman who is selling bread, and if she's only using that same style, like that's how she sells her bread, over time she'll become irrelevant. First of all, if that's the only type of bread she's bringing in these days, that bread, the packaging have become so fanciful. If she still continues to do the agege bread style where you buy nylon, that's transparent nylon, you tie it with your hand, all of that, you find if she keeps doing only that, after a while nobody will buy bread from her. Now people want bread where the nylon is a bit fancy, there's some nice printing on the side. They want the bread to look a bit different. Okay, it needs to be sliced, maybe a little bit more buttery. Like, she just has to evolve her business. If she stays the same way, her business will die. That's just it.
Thank you so much for that. Verbon, was that good? You need more there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, perfect. Really helpful. Thanks.
All right.
You're welcome.
We have one more question, and that's from Fumi. And she's asking, what range of skills or resource can someone start with becoming a technical product manager? I think someone's interested in becoming a technical product manager.
Okay. So I'm not sure how you're defining technical product manager, but I assume you're asking like a product manager that's a little bit more technical. One thing I would encourage people to do is, I see a lot of people take classes, CS classes, all those are helpful, but if you take CS classes that are very theoretical, you probably won't learn much. It won't be very useful to you. So what I encourage people to do is to build. Is to build stuff. You want to be, as a product manager, you want to be a little bit more technical. Just build stuff. Start with building a website. It's, these days building websites have become so easy. In fact, start with no code tools. There are tools called no code. You don't need to write any code. You just start by moving things, but that will help you understand how things fit together on a website, right? Like what's happening on the UI versus what are things that you need to wire up, and connect to either some database or some other service. And they're like actually very simple and you can do them, right? I've met very, very non-tech, in fact, people who they were not even trying to learn to be technical. I just told them, hey, they were like, oh, I need to build a website, I'm trying to hire someone, all of that. I was like, hey, you can build this yourself, right? Like you can actually build this thing. And they're like, no, I don't. I was like, okay, point them to 2 or 3 resources, no code, they don't need to write. And they were able to build the website. In fact, they built like 2 or 3 versions of that website. So my advice is start by building. Build, situate your learning within the context of building. First, it will help you tie your learning to real world things. It will be easier for you to speak to what you're learning, and it will be also hopefully be more motivating, right? When I was learning to code, I actually started by some online class. I think there was some Stanford online class where some of the exciting part was game. I was building game development in, I think, C++ or something. And they'll give you some starter code and then you have to do the rest. Man, it was fun. It was fun to know that, oh, I could write some lines of code and I could actually build a snake game. Or I could build a tennis game, 2D tennis, nothing super fancy, but it will actually be tennis. I can move the bats, the paddles around, and I can even automate it so that I will play against, the computer. So that is, I would say, one of the most effective ways to just build stuff. You would learn the technical chops, and of course, engage with other technical product managers, find out like what are the new technologies they're working with. Just read generally about those new technologies, try to understand them. If you hear of new frameworks, try to understand them. You don't need to be an expert in them by no means, but at least you can have, some high level understanding. Oh, okay, this is what this does. This is what this does.
All right, thank you very much for that. Fumi, do let us know in the chat if that's okay with you. And yes, all right. Thank you very much once again, Isaac. So before you leave, there's going to be a scholarship giveaway. I'm going to ask a question based off of Isaac's session. So, but just wait. After now, there's going to be a scholarship giveaway once again. So, Fumi, will you give us a feedback to let us know if that's okay? Right. So yes. Do we have any more questions? Any more questions? Feedback? I want to say 1 or 2 things you learned from the session. Just sharing feedback. Okay. All right. Without any response for now, I think that will do. So once again, let's just thank Isaac for this wonderful session. Isaac, thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I believe quite a number of us we've learned as well. And thank you so much, so much for this. I don't know if you have any final or closing remarks, like the Jedi remarks.
Well, I mean, it's also been my pleasure to share with this audience. And yeah, I'm passionate about helping group product managers. I'm also helping African product managers build the right skill set. So feel free to connect with me. My DMs are open. Send me messages via things you're thinking through. Yeah, I also have in the past volunteered to coach people. Of course, I'm very selective about, people I coach, but, if you you're very, very passionate about the field, you have